want to thank Anand and CIM for this opportunity to share in these conversations. Since Anand had asked me to participate in this webinar, I've had just one prayer. So I approached this session and this whole seminar with one prayer. And the prayer really being, God, at this time, let not any of our Christian organization collapse under the burden of this moment, of this situation, of this uncertainty, but really rise up and go beyond and be renewed in their mission, because we owe this mission not to ourselves. And I like Anand's fine difference between organizational sustainability and mission continuity. So we're really talking about mission continuity because this is about the people we serve and not about ourselves. So with that in mind, I wanted to talk to you about what we have. Okay. So I want to look at how do we create opportunities in the midst of crisis. And I was mentioning, this is my prayer, that none of our Christian organization in our nation would collapse under the burden of this, because we owe it to the people we originally sought to serve, to be able to not only just merely survive and continue, but to be able to go beyond and provide for them what we had promised in terms of our mission. There are quite a few words that are floating around when we think of this pandemic. One common word is, how are we coping? Instead of saying bye, we say stay safe. Probably there are quite a few words that come to our mind when we think of a pandemic, this pandemic. And I was wondering if some of you would like to put on the chat box the words that come to your mind when you think of this crisis. So, and this morning I want to talk to you about, or share with you, not as an expert, like Anand keeps referring to me as expert. No way, by any stretch of imagination, am I an expert. Basically sharing lessons, knowing that these are very experience-based in learning from others as well, like Dale and others over the years. I want to share with you a few thoughts. I like the statement as I was preparing from Winston Churchill, and I'm sure all of you have heard this. We never let a good crisis go to waste. This is that opportunity. You don't want this crisis, and this crisis is in many ways different from others that we have gone through. It's global in nature, high levels of uncertainty. We are just simply drifting from one lockdown to another lockdown. No one seems to know where they're leading us, but our politicians pretend as though they are in control. But you and I know we're just simply moving from one uncertainty to another uncertainty. The new name for that uncertain period is called lockdown. So that is our current situation. But interesting, if you look at the note below the slide, the picture, the statement, he made the statement when Winston Churchill in that Crimea conference forged an alliance between US, UK, and Russia. Completely unlikely partners. And very interesting, because he took on to that opportunity, he was able to, in some sense, become the forerunner for our current United Nations. So who knows where God is leading our mission organizations? Many of you from hospitals, schools, God just might have another face, a completely different face for your mission. So don't lose that opportunity. The other piece was Pope Francis' statement that I picked up recently, reading his Easter newsletter. He's, of course, not able to address his audience like he does every Easter. So this newsletter says, I hope that this time of danger will free us from operating on autopilot. And I would like to suggest many of us mission organizations are very comfortable functioning with autopilots. Minimum disruption, and if any disruption, we panic, go into all kinds of confusion if our autopilot mode gets disturbed. And the Pope says it shakes us out of our sleepy consciences and allow a humanist and ecological conversion that puts an end to the idolatry of money. I wonder whether this just could be a description of Christian organizations, an idolatry of money. And this just could be that shake-up time. And the Pope recommends that we place human life and dignity at the center as a result of this conversion. I want to share with you 7 lessons, open to question and answers later as we move on. The first lesson that I want to share is that leadership is about creating opportunities in the midst of crisis. Absolutely mandatory. There is no way you as leaders can go into a paralysis mode during this time, because we owe it to our people, like I keep reminding. Mission is not about you and your organization. Mission is about the people we serve. We need to be able to go beyond simply managing the crisis to providing leadership. This is something I thought was very interesting, that the decisions you take now or don't take now, and I think non-decision has much greater negative impact as compared to wrong decisions, are hard times, and these decisions will alter your organizational identity. So recognize that you are investing in the future of your organization. There will be need for unpopular choices. I'm on the boards of a few organizations. We had a conversation yesterday in one of the boards. The bottom line rules, even for Christian organizations, this is about our budget, this is about our donors. We don't have money, what to do? Any conversation about repositioning is a luxury. What to do with this little, the big budget cut that we are facing. So it'll require unpopular choices, tough decisions. And I want to recommend as leaders that you do not be dismissive of intuition. I would like to recommend, when you are leaders, it's 80% intuition and 20% facts. In the other levels of the organization, probably the equation is different. It's 80% facts and 20% intuition. But at leadership level, do not despise your intuition. Pay attention to what your intuition says, the sense of what you think you should be doing. And the 2 cautions I would place, or 3 cautions I would place: consider all the facts that are placed before you. But remember, rely on your intuition too. Make it a collective exercise. Third is nurture that intuition with a very strong biblical frame. It's your conscience, it's the spirit, inner spirit communing with the Holy Spirit. You want to grapple with that conversation as part of your intuition. It's not just common sense, it's far beyond common sense. The other necessity as a leader at this time, being comfortable with ambiguity. Many of us leaders would love everything in black and white. It should all add up to your bottom line. Unfortunately, crisis messes up your bottom line. And it is about being comfortable with ambiguities. And the choice is not easy choices between two exclusively good options, or two bad choices. You'll have to choose between one bad and the other bad, or one good and the other good. This is about that kind of a decision making. This is not about how do you make a choice between good and bad. Common sense. This is far beyond common sense. And like I said earlier, this is the time when your decisions today will determine your organization's identity, and you will forever be known as the organization that collapsed under a burden, or an organization that rose up and renewed itself and came through this crisis. So you want to be careful about the decisions that you take. The second lesson that I learned during this time is that leadership crisis is about being stubborn about your vision and mission, while being agile and nimble about your strategy, approaches, and tactics. Unfortunately, many of us are so comfortable and live in the realm of strategy and approaches and tactics on a daily basis, 24/7. And our vision and mission is neatly packed and kept in our bookshelves. And occasionally we refer to it. We are lost, because the only world we seem to have known on a daily basis is strategy, approaches, and tactics. This just might be the time when you say, maybe we need to revisit our strategy, approaches, and tactics. But your vision and mission for which God had birthed your organization is still true. So be stubborn about it. That's why God had placed you here. It's important for you to pursue your vision and mission. But being agile and nimble is the key mantra here, that you want to be able to move. In World Vision, when the tsunami hit us, we had no clue what the tsunami was. The water getting into the land, early descriptions of it. And then we saw water entering to the land all across our nation. And then suddenly in different parts of the world, I had no clue how to respond. And World Vision had its own particular preferred approach. We just put that on hold and started moving and becoming relevant to the crisis. Remember, at this time, if you're not relevant to the people when they are going through crisis, when they make decisions about God and things of God, our God will become an irrelevant variable. This is a time to be relevant in people's lives. You have no choice about what to do with your mission, because God has placed in your heart your vision and mission, so you're obedient to that. Hold your strategy lightly. This is the time when you want to explore new markets with your donors. This is the time to get into donor education very seriously and say, this is a time to be relevant to a crisis. Which donor would not want to be relevant to a crisis? Great opportunity for them to improve their market too. So you want to talk to them about that. Do not set boundaries, but create an organizational culture which generates alternatives. Remember, the last word in mission is still not written. If you're running a school, maybe there is another way to meet the education needs of your children. Our churches are discovering this. If you're running a hospital, maybe there is another way to reach out to the last mile at a time like this. This is not really running about the hospital institution, but this is about delivering health. Is there a way to redefine our purpose? And like we always say, we always did this way before, or this is the founder's way. Time to rethink on some of those hard choices. But remember, the primary point of reference is your vision and mission. You want to ask yourself, what is the reason why God has placed us here in this part of the country, in this part of the world, with this people group? What does God desire of us at this time? A conversation that you want to have with your stakeholders, with community donors and others. Some great examples of this more recently, whoever thought Mahindra, which produces vehicles, will start producing ventilators. Maruti, which is also into the auto industry, producing masks and ventilators. Samsung, which is working on producing, has converted its office space into care centers for those infected with COVID. Samsung providing iPads to students so that they can access online classes. Self-help groups that are so often so locked into their own finances and refinancing, suddenly called upon to produce masks. So it is possible, obviously, if Mahindra and Maruti and Samsung can redefine its strategy and approach without compromising on their vision and mission. I'm sure you and I can do it with our Christian organizations. The third lesson that I want to offer you is leadership is an opportunity for molding organizational culture. This is your time to create the new normal. Don't waste this opportunity. Every time you celebrate great performance during times of crisis, remember opportunity to make it a culture of excellence. So that when people look back and say, oh, during that crisis, this is what we did as an organization. This is also a time when people will be willing to go beyond their job descriptions. Generate a spirit of volunteerism within Christian organization using crisis. No one is worried about job descriptions. This is the time to be able to look up and say, okay, is there anybody who's able to do it? Forget which department, which role, what job description. There's a crisis. We saw this when World Vision handled its tsunami and some of our political crisis that hit us. Staff from across our nation put up their hands and say, we want to be there to be able to help. There is a spirit of volunteerism that should be defining all Christian organization suddenly surfaces at this time. As leaders, learn to mobilize that spirit of volunteerism. This is the time when you start defining higher standards of performance, competence, try out new combinations of roles and staff. You'll be able to set this at this time. You want to also look at this as leaders as an opportunity to build second line leaders. You will see people from unlikely quarters suddenly emerging as people who will be able to move forward in a time of crisis. Great material for second line leadership. Look for them as leaders. Jot them down, put them into your talent pool, grow them for your future of your organization. Be in touch with your staff, absolutely compulsory. This is the time for leaders to be compassionate, not lost in yourself and say, oh, poor me. I will have to lead this organization at a time like this. No, you're not the poor me. The staff are the poor me. So pay attention to them, talk to them, call them, be compassionate. When you administer issues of salaries and increments, where you'll have to take painful decisions, if you're fully involved and compassionate and engage with them, they would probably even take it, they would probably even suggest. Yesterday in that board meeting, I was so interested in one of them, the board recommended a particular cut for the staff, and this staff, senior staff who said, no, I think knowing my staff, we would be able to take bigger cuts. Who ever thought if this is possible from staff? So make sure you use this crisis to create a new organizational culture for your organization. Lead from the front. If you're allowed to cut down salaries and increments, start with yourself and then the staff. As leading would require that you walk out of your comfort zones. The fourth lesson that I want to share is leadership in crisis communicates with transparency. There is nothing called over communication. Step up your communication with your staff, call for staff meetings, have Zoom calls, phone calls, newsletters, name it. You want to communicate to your staff so that they are in it. Collective ownership is the key at this time. Convert your board and your leadership team as war rooms so that you are able to discuss methods, strategies, approaches, tactics in your board. Communicate with your board regularly at this time. The board wants to know and also wants to feel that they are adding value at a time when the organization is going through crisis. Communicate with your donors. The key communication with your donors is that you and the donors are still relevant for a crisis, not just for peacetime. This is your time to communicate to the donors. Demonstrate relevance at this stage. You want to communicate not just the decision, but also the rationale for your decision. There'll be people in your organization, you give them an idea, they will tell you, I don't know whether you have people like that in your organization. They'll tell you that the first thing they will respond is the 100 reasons why that decision is a wrong decision. And then if you're patient with them, the 101st decision will be, yes, I think we can do it. Take your skeptics along with you. Involve the staff in generating solutions. Communicate frequently. You don't need to communicate complete, well thought through information. Incomplete information is good enough. Time of crisis. But your communication should inspire confidence and hope, even as you deal with issues of relevance. In one of the articles I read recently, you want to be microscopic in your analysis of current issues and telescopic when you look at the future. You want to be able to walk between those. Unfortunately, that space between being microscopic and telescopic is the leadership's role. You cannot abdicate, you cannot delegate it. You will have to do it and lead from the front. Remember, as leaders, you need your times of laughter. Don't look serious. Remember, you're only managing your organization. You're not managing India. That Modi will probably do that, hopefully. And so you want to deal with this new culture, sit and talk to people, laugh, enjoy your time with them. because all of them are going through tensions. Walk through the corridors if you have an office building, the corridors through your Zoom calls, with your phone calls, talk to people. Don't get stuck with yourself. Communication is about managing perceptions, not managing gossips with facts and truth. So you don't fight gossip, you manage gossips with, keep gossips informed with fact and truth. The last three lessons that I've learned of managing crisis like tsunami, staff crisis, crisis in terms of our PR, government relations, finance, all kinds of crises that we had to go through, but nothing compared to what we are in, but lessons learned from this. The fifth lesson that I've learned is this is your opportunity to maximize your organization's footprint. And this would require developing social skills. Unfortunately, this is another fact that most Christian organizations are known for. We tend to become solo players, star shows. We are more comfortable with star shows than working along with others. World Vision has been guilty of that. And this is our crisis times has forced us to start working with others. We suddenly realize two things. That our self-dependence mode doesn't work. We also realize that our partners know and identify strengths in us that we were never aware of. So this is a great time to be able to create new partnerships with other NGOs, with government. In this kind of a crisis, you want to develop partnerships with the first responders, invariably government and para-government institutions at all levels, community, panchayat, district. Unfortunately, because of our peacetime comfortableness, we tend not to develop networks and partnerships. Unfortunately, crisis will force us to develop new partnerships. You want to be able to come out of your shell and look for new partners so that you can learn from them, work along with them, so that you can maximize impact. No one organization can guarantee and assure the nation of full impact without partnerships. The sixth lesson is leadership during crisis reinforces some of the basics of the organization that often gets forgotten when we go into autopilot and complacency. As the leaders of organization, you need to be visible in the forefront, in the communities. Now may not be physical, but through phone calls, reach out to the last community in your area of operation and have conversations. Find out how they are. Let them know that leaders were concerned enough to make a call and inquire how they are, not just the staff, but the community, so that you communicate a particular bias. Leadership is about bias. A leader without a bias is insipid, never contagious. So this is your time to reinforce organization's basics, be visible in the field where the sandal meets the sand. Don't get stuck in meetings and Zoom calls and other things. You want to be able to reach out to people where it's hurting and make yourself relevant. Keep your finger on the pulse of the organization. A good crisis shakes us out of our complacency. Leadership is the result of blood, sweat, tears, and prayers. Blood, sweat, tears, and prayers communicates passion. Passion is contagious. Strategy, rarely contagious. So this is your time to communicate passion, your personal passion and the organization's passion. The last lesson that I've learned over the years has been leadership during crisis reinforces dependence on God as a way of life. Unfortunately, what we've seen and some of the documents that I see from organizations that I'm related to, that the languages, we have now mobilized prayer, and after the COVID infection and pandemic is over, we will slowly tone it down. I said, whoa, what happened? Dependence on God is a way of life. And one of the big reminders for World Vision was that we need to be dependent on God. In spite of our size and whatever else we might talk about, end of the day, to be able to come in the presence of God, this is a good time to do it. And leadership in our tsunami operations and whatever crisis forced us to go to God and as a way of life. We learned through this that this is a proactive choice that the organization makes rather than a reactive choice to a crisis. Let me just go on. This is the time you also learn that there is nothing called permanent leader in an organization. The highest act of leadership is to let go. During times of crisis, you will have more opportunities to be able to let go to your team and to others, so that you do your trial run when your time is over in your organization. You'll be able to walk off with a deep sense of gratitude to God. At some point, the COVID-19 crisis will pass. We may or may not be there, but I'm hoping our mission will continue. And everything you do now will be analyzed after the dust settles. So remember, you're investing in your future during this time of crisis. Will your actions and identity be seen as being consistent? Decisions made during this crisis will likewise shape your organization's identity and tell a story that will leave traces long after. There's some good references. There are plenty more that I'm sure you can access. Over to you, Anand or David, for our time of questions and answers.
Friends, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hands, or feel free to write your questions on the chat box also. David will be able to guide us. Yeah.
Just a reminder, if you want to raise your hand in your computer, you'll have to click on participants, and on the right it's raise hand. If you're on your phone, you'll have to click on more and then raise hand. Or as Mr. Anand said, you can ask your question through the chat box. Mr. Jayakumar Christian, I'm not sure if you can see the chat. Dr. Shantanu Tata has asked a question. How reliable is intuition?
Yeah, let me try. Shantanu, how are you? Just wanted to mention intuition. The reliability of intuition, there are 3 checks that we said. One is you want to do your homework on facts, but none of us would have all the facts at any time. We all know that in our leadership experience. There is nothing called all the facts. We still have trickling in many facts after the event. Second is you want to make it a collective process. This is when we listen and learn from others in our team and other stakeholders. Third, you want to mold and shape that institution by our dependence on God and our study of the word. So those would be my 3 checks and balance, Shantanu, that God forbid that we drift using intuition. But intuition, do not be dismissive of it. Do not despise intuition. When I've seen this over and over again, there's a time when you want to be able to look to God and say, yeah, God, what is the sense? What is your word for a time like this? There is a question.
Yeah.
If the organization is unable to pay salary, what would you suggest? This is what we did. Prasenjit, was we had to put on hold some of our programs. The test simply was, is it relevant for this time of crisis? So we clearly put some programs on hold. Second, we definitely cut back on many of our administrative costs, which were not absolutely necessary. Third is, we also, the leadership took the cut first. We absorbed the cut first as leaders. And for the staff, we basically maintained them on a maintenance salary. So that's what we did. What you don't want to do is you don't want to let go of staff at this time. You don't want to use a crisis to let go of staff, problem staff, not a great time to deal with HR issues at this time, especially in our country with so much of consciousness that you don't want to lay off staff at this time. This just could lead us to a lot of court cases. People will attribute motives as to why you let them go. So without retrenching them, you want to manage with your salaries, because God willing, and the way you meet with this crisis head on, and when you are a renewed, transformed organization, you will need that workforce. At that time, to take new workforce and retrain them will be more expensive than maintaining them. And like I said earlier, this is your workforce to be converted into your volunteers. Trust that helps, Representative. Thanks, Shantanu.
There is one more question.
Sunil has said, intuition in a leader was a follower of Lord, especially the leader as the Spirit of God. This is a supernatural being when biblical principles are followed. I fully agree with what Sunil has said, and I think we just accept. The only caution is that intuition does not reside only in the leader. We want to listen and learn from your leadership team and others who are 100% involved in this time. Thanks, Sunil. Any other questions?
There is one more question from one Mahima. It's Mahima, I think.
Is in the chat box.
It's not in the chat box.
Okay.
She has sent it privately. Government tried all its best to stop our good work, mainly among the tribals and rural parts of the country. But now insist NGOs work with them. How should we react?
Yeah. One of the operational definitions of crisis that I want to offer to you at this time, it is a health crisis, very clearly. It's an economic crisis. But it is also a crisis when authoritarianism is emerging. This is a good time for, especially our current leadership in the country, to start controlling everybody in the name of pandemic. They say, people who study history, this is a natural, especially for an ideology-driven political party. They would like to use a good crisis to to control, take control of civil society and NGOs. That's the other aspect of the crisis that private citizens don't face, but you and I face. You want to be aware of that as leaders, you want to be careful about this. You are also dealing with the new definition of poor in our country. Who is poor is getting redefined in our nation. Today's migrant, I was thinking of it this morning, our middle class and the rich rush to the shop to do what they call as panic buying, while the poor wanted to go home. That's all. The only fault was they wanted to go home. And they were stuck. And we will have a new generation of poor and poverty that we will have to deal with. And I hope as mission organizations that you're keeping your pulse on the country, not just on your organization. Listen and see what God wants you to do for the new poor. There's a question which someone else has.
Dr. Jayakumar, we'll handle one question.
Okay.
I think Sunil's question, what should the response of the leader be to the financial crisis in the mission hospital? Almost every hospital, yeah. All the other questions, David will copy it. We will bring it in another time.
Very good.
David will do that, but this question alone will.
Sunil, what should response of a leader be to financial crisis in the mission? This has many faces to it, Sunil. One is the donors are not able to raise resources at a time like this for what their traditional appeal. What we've learned was this just might be a time for the organizations like us to interface directly with donors and help them to rebrand the product, their marketing product at a time like this. And we found this very useful. And this is the time when you want to talk directly to your donors and be able to share with them saying, maybe this is the new product you want to market rather than the old products. Your old products are not making sense, especially in a global pandemic like this. People are noticing and they want to do this. Economic crisis in various corporates. People's income are low, unemployment is high. not a good time to ask for donations and sponsorships. How do we create a new market? And once our donors find new market and find themselves relevant to a crisis like this, we found tsunami, like I said, we had no clue how to deal with it. And our budget was low. By the time we got into tsunami, for World Vision at least, by God's grace, really nothing smart about ourselves, our budget doubled during that time. And since then, World Vision's budget has kept growing. After the tsunami, whatever the relief portion went off, but World Vision's budget had doubled during that time, basically because we helped our donors find their relevance in their constituency, while we found relevance in our constituency. And we need to work along with others.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jayakumar.
Hey, there's a good question by Mithun, I think, just added.
Okay. Yeah.
I would love to affirm your question that this is the new normal that we'll have to work with, Mithun. This is the time when we need to ask our hard questions about our administrative expenses, our lifestyle, the image of the organization. We find ourselves, we really didn't need it, but unfortunately we kept living with it and spent huge money. This just might be a hard time to ask questions about your administrative expense too. Thanks. Thanks, Anand.
Thank you.